So that's the individual that you want to have x-rayed to make sure there's nothing going on that's a worse developmental issue. And I have seen in basketball where kids keep on playing and they slam dunk the ball and they'll have a fracture of that growth plate. And if they have fractures of the growth plate, that can be something that will result in a lower limb angular malalignment. The other thing we see with growth plate injuries is a mismatch where, particularly in middle school, there may be some totally mature football players and others that haven't gone through their growth phase. So those younger appearance, not as mature, are going to get crushed and potentially have a growth plate injury. So it's a matter of mass and maturity, and sometimes the more aggressive youngster would be the fast, skinny one that hasn't gone through a growth phase, but he may be more at risk for a contact serious knee injury through the growth plate.
And these growth plate injuries kind of go across the spectrum, regardless of gender, regardless of sport. I mean, they're an issue. Is there a greater age that's at risk here with growth plate?
For overuse, probably more when they are in that growth phase, because everything seems like the femur, for example, is the fastest growing bone in the body, so there's a lot of forces on that kneecap tendon. And so I would say probably in females it's a little bit earlier because their growth phase is a little earlier, so it might be more, like about 10 years old in the females and 12-year-olds in the males that would have these Osgood-Schlatter's problems.
Okay. Sherry, we talked about education. What are ways that are getting the word out that you're aware of to educate coaches and parents?
Coaches definitely need to be trained in first aid, CPR. I think that's very important. You learn a lot of basics in the first aid aspect of it. A lot of at the end, you're going to go over some resources. There's some great websites out there right now that have a lot of information on sports injury prevention, signs and symptoms, what to look for, what is an injury. I think it's real important that that you keep playing through pain, that we no longer live by that slogan anymore. If a coach or a parent realizes an athlete is hurting, as Dr. Ireland said, they're not going to come right out and tell you, then you need to really sit them down and say, okay, look, what's going on? Are you in a lot of pain? If you keep playing, you're only going to make it worse. And as an athletic trainer, we do that on a daily basis, where we, one-on-one with the athlete, okay, look, if you really keep playing, you're going to be sitting out a lot longer than if we take care of this right now, and that we put you back out there when you're healthy and you can help yourself and the team, instead of making it worse for everybody, yourself and the team included. So, and a lot of it's common sense. You and I had discussed that a little bit before, but if your child is hurt, or if you're a coach and you see an athlete is hurt, sit them down. There's nothing wrong with being a little more conservative and just sitting them down for a couple days to make sure that things are okay. And then after 2-3 days, there hasn't been a lot of improvement, send them to a physician or a trained healthcare professional that can look them over and decide what they need to do and what their best plan of treatment is at that point in time. The other point I wanted to make, talking about the baseball thing, I think one thing people forget, especially in the youth, you're always going to have one athlete that stands out a little bit more, a couple athletes. And so the pitchers, so if you go on, and we have a great website that tells them about pitch counts. Well, I've talked to some younger kids and they said, well, Sherry, I follow those pitch counts. And I said, well, when you're done pitching, what do you do? Well, I go play shortstop, or I'm the catcher, or I go to the outfield. And it's like, okay, you're totally defeating the purpose because you're still throwing. So that means that you don't just keep throwing, you just stop. And that, that really helps prevent the injury, instead of, going out and playing in the field and continuing on and putting more and more stress on that body part. So common sense things, I think we all know it, but as you both alluded to, the win factor is such a big thing, and the peer pressure and the parents and the coaches, that we just all need to sometimes just sit back and say, okay, this is for the kids and we need to take care of them.
So it sounds like two of the problem areas is getting the word out, things like you all have been talking about, out to the coaches in these youth sports. Are there efforts being made currently to get that, to see that's happening?
There's the AOSSM has a huge coalition right now, which is to stop youth sports injuries, and that's one of the websites that you'll put up, Safe Kids Coalition is also very involved. This is the first year they've ever addressed sports injuries. They've always addressed more of, the car seat issues and playground issues. They have a whole website on different youth issues, and they're really on board with, okay, we really need to concentrate more now on the athletics and the recreational coaches and athletes that don't have access maybe to like the high schools or our middle schools where we have athletic trainers, to give them more training as far as, okay, what do you do when you have an injury? Because that's a lot of pressure on a coach. They're not trained to take care of injuries. It's like, is it broke? Is it not broke? What do I do with them? And parents don't always know that either. So it's just getting onto these websites, contacting your healthcare professionals in your communities, talking to your athletic trainers, different people like that as far as what you can do to prevent and take care of injuries once they happen.
And I think it goes back to what you said, Dr. Ireland, and what you said, common sense. If it hurts, stop.
Right.
I mean, it's...
In which, again, the kids aren't going to say that. So having somebody they can communicate with, maybe it's somebody else in the family, but in my experience, sometimes the parents just get so engrossed and really put a lot of pressure on these youth athletes, because and I don't think the parents realize how much pressure they're putting on these athletes. And when I get them in the office, sometimes I try to talk directly to that child, and that child may not be happy being hurt all the time, and it's hard for them to voice something because they want to get back yesterday. And I think this concept of getting back very immediately following an injury, or whether you need surgery, you need to be healthy both mentally and physically, and also the psychology of not getting hurt again, or maybe getting back at that person that hurt you, or those kinds of things. So I think you really need a good healthy mind and physical set before going back totally to these kinds of sports.
Okay. Well, Sherry, you've alluded to it a couple of times, the athletic training program here in Fayette County. We've featured it a couple of times on this program, but it can't hurt to, again, inform our viewers of what Fayette County Public Schools and UK Healthcare is doing as it relates to the athletic training program. Kind of give us a brief summation of the program and how it works.
Fayette County has really always strived to take care of their athletes. Since Dr. Ireland had it in 1987, or even before that, they've always had athletic trainers at the 5 public high schools. They came to us 2 years ago and said, we'd like to put athletic trainers in the middle schools, which, just was incredible, because nationwide, we don't even have statistics on middle school injuries, et cetera. And so for them to come forward and say, we want to take care of these kids also, was just wonderful. And so now we have 5 certified athletic trainers within the 11 middle schools that cover their events, and that are now, they've been in there 2 years, and now the coaches and parents are finally realizing, oh, okay, they're here to help us, not to keep our kid out of the game, but they're actually here to, help prevent the injury once they get injured, to help them get through it and get them back safely and put them back on the floor of the field when they should be out there, not before then. So, hats off to Fayette County. They've done a phenomenal job, and a lot of the surrounding communities in Kentucky have certified athletic trainers. So, I'm very proud of what this state does, and especially Fayette County, because they've really stepped up and set an example for everyone else in the state.
I would say that with, particularly like we said, we're not targeting baseball, but it's
right.
a highly visible sport, and oftentimes these injuries at the elbow come to surgery. So this is kind of why we know this tip of the iceberg, but we really don't have great studies on injuries in youth sports. And this is where, with Fayette County, we have an opportunity at the middle school level to track some of these injuries and see, how much it does affect these athletes. Do they go on after an injury and do better, not get re-injured? And so I would encourage coaches and parents to utilize the athletic training program as something that, the children can be seen, and then we can, it's not that they have to see a doctor or anybody, but at least we open that communication line, and perhaps that can prevent a minor injury from becoming a surgical injury.